Hello everyone, my name is Brendan Snyder. Thank you so much for joining me and welcome to a video where we're going to take a look back at 2022 through 101 new studio albums that were released. And I think 2022 was a really great year. So much cool stuff came out. Beyond just the studio stuff, there was a lot of cool archival and live and rare type things that came out as well. We had the 40th anniversary of Creatures of the Night from Kiss. We had The Cure, Wish, the 30th anniversary edition of that, Queen, The Miracle. So lots of cool deluxe things, but we're not focusing on that sort of stuff. We're going to focus just on the new studio albums that came out, 101 of those. And if you've seen some of the videos on the rest of my channel, then you know that when I'm not keeping stuff out on the walls like this, I keep them in boxes like this that I made. And I usually refer to this as a best of the box series, where each of these things usually holds 90 CDs. But in this case, because we had a lot of digipacks and things like that this past year, I've actually got 101 in this box here. So I've got this down in front of me, and we're going to dive into this here in just a bit and sort of have a cool look back at the year through brand new releases like this. But before we get started, if you're new to my channel and you haven't already hit the subscribe button, please click the button. Also leave a comment, hit like. All those things help support my channel. I would greatly appreciate it. And of course, as an added bonus, by subscribing, you'll be able to stay up to date on cool videos just like this one, where we are taking a look back at 2022 through 101 new studio albums released. And I've got this alphabetical here, so we're going to start in the A's. We'll finish up in the Z's. We'll do 365 days of releases here, and see what we come up with. So first one up goes to a Yes-related band, Arc of Life, and this is actually their second album, Don't Look Down. 6 tracks featured on it. We got lead vocalist, or current lead vocalist of Yes. We've also got bassist in there, and we've got various other guys that are related to the group. So very cool little side project for them to do when they're not focusing on the band Yes. We then have Tobias Sammet's Avantasia, and this one here, which is a paranormal evening with the Moonflower Society. Quite the title there, but he's cool. He's always putting together these very sort of rock opera style things, or really I should call them metal operas, because that's more what this is in line with here. But he has a lot of cool guests that come and join these things. Tobias Sammet's from the band Ed Guy, so he kind of floats between these two things here. We then had a super group called A to Z, perfect title for what we're doing right now. Ray Adler from Fates Warning. We also have Mark Zonder in here, a former Fates Warning drummer, pairing back up to do that. That was a pretty cool, progressive metal thing. Autograph, the 80s band, put out a brand new album called Beyond. This was the last one to feature Randy Rand, who unfortunately passed away, the last original member of the group. He was the bassist. So unfortunately, that may well be the end, at least of this lineup of Autograph, because I did hear that the original guitar player wants to start his version of the band back up, and I think he's reclaiming the name for that. Skunk Baxter, famous guitar player. I mean, he's played with everybody, most notably I think with both the Doobie Brothers and Steely Dan. This is called Speed of Heat, and it's cool because he does the song My Old School from Steely Dan. Really, really great rocked up version of it on here. 90s rockers Bush put out a brand new one that is called The Art of Survival. Very good album there. I was really glad to get this next one here. Black Swan, their second album, supergroup featuring Robin McCauley of Michael Schenker Group. We got Reb Beach on guitar in there, Jeff Pilson on bass, and Mike Starr on drums. So quite the who's who, their lineup. Really, really doing some great work. Then we've got a new Graham Bonnet Band album, Graham Bonnet being from Rainbow, Alcatraz, a number of different projects and things like that. This one, I believe, is the third album now that he has done under the Graham Bonnet Band name. Supposedly he is working on a new Alcatraz, even though the rest of the guys in Alcatraz continued on with a different vocalist. Brand new Cult album, Under the Midnight Sun. Very, very good album. This one here was a real surprise to me when I first got it. Didn't quite click, but as time went on, it really, really grew and became something great in my opinion. new Collective Soul album. This one here is called Vibrating, and I kind of like the cult. This one here caught me off guard in how good it was. The last few albums that they had done were good, but they didn't just click with me, but this one here in particular really did. And we got a brand new Crowded House album. Of course, you know, frontman from Crowded House, you know, now with Fleetwood Mac, so I think a little bit of trying to tie into that connection there and releasing this album here that's called Dreamers Are Waiting. A little hard to read in the script that they wrote that on, but yeah, so that was kind of cool there. I really hope that Neil Finn records with Fleetwood Mac and we get an album that way, not just as Crowded House, but I do like Crowded House, so that was great. The Dead Daisies Radiance, second album with Glenn Hughes as the front man. This one unfortunately did not really click with me. I really liked the last album that they did. It just blew me away. This one here, not as much, but again, I'm hoping that that one will grow on me in time. This one ended up being my album of the year. Def Leppard, Diamond Star Halos. Just absolutely fantastic. No, it's not their classic era stuff. If you're waiting around for an album to be that from the 80s, I don't think it's ever going to happen. But this album, despite it having a newer modern sound to it, it just worked as a Def Leppard album. And it was so good. It just pulled me right in, held me all the way through. And it's one of those ones that I continue to go back to just over and over and over throughout the past year. This was a good one too. William Duvall, the current frontman for Alice in Chains, in a cool signed edition that came from the website. Even though this says live in studio, it is the new album. There's no audience to it, and they just recorded, I think, without overdubs. It's called 11/12/21, which is when it was recorded. And this one here, the first album that he did was more of a solo acoustic thing. This one here with full band. Udo Dirk Schneider, lead vocalist for, well, former lead vocalist of Accept, but also his own band, Udo, does this, which is cover songs, but celebrating his career in music. Then we have a brand new Enough's Enough album. Only original member left is Chips Enough, but still, these guys are still doing it, still sounding great. And I think with every release that they do now without Donnie V, each one has gotten better and better. Yes, I would like Donnie V back in the lineup, the original lead vocalist, but I think they're doing pretty good, and I'm happy with it. Next one, Ellefson Soto. So David Ellefson, formerly of Megadeth, and Jeff Scott Soto, formerly from Yngwie Malmsteen Band, Sons of Apollo, stuff like that, pairing up, making an album together. And that was one that I didn't think I would enjoy, but after listening to a little bit, sampling it, I found that I really enjoyed it. It was a great album. The Ferrymen, like this, picked this up, of course, for Ronnie Romero, who's fronting the group, but Magnus Carlsen being part of this, and Mike Tirana on drums. A really good project that they do. Third, maybe fourth album, can't recall, but all of them are good. If you've never checked those out, if you're a fan of Ronnie Romero's vocals, that's a great one. This was a cool comeback album, or one just after a long time, I think, probably a decade or so. The Fix, and the album itself, if I can find the title real quick, Every 5 Seconds. Really good. Again, something that clicked with me. The first track on here, A Life Survived, and the second track, Closer. Very, very good stuff. I mean, the whole album was great, but it was those two tracks when kicking off the album that just sold it for me. Got a brand new one from Ghost this past year. This one here called, Impera. So many albums. Trying to remember all the titles of them in my head. That's why I have to stop and look at the sleeve sometimes. Another good one, the track on here, Spillways. Third track on here, just super, super good. I don't know how those guys do it. They just come up with great melody within the sort of metal, and I've always sort of thought of them as a cross between like 1970s Blue Oyster Cult and the Misfits with a modern tinge to it. Works for me though. All right, we also got the Goo Goo Dolls and a brand new album from them, Chaos in Bloom. First track on here, Yeah, I Like You. Another great one there from those guys. And Also, Liam Gallagher, frontman from Oasis, put out a brand new one. This one did not really click with me here. Come On You Know is the title of this one. His past couple albums, and that's actually how I got into Oasis. I was never a big fan of Oasis back in the day, but I kind of came into them through his solo work because I really enjoyed that. This one, not so much, but you know, again, I like to keep these things in the collection because you never know when you're going to be in the mood for something like that. Giant put out a new one. Great band from back in the early 90s, Shifting Time. We've got different members you know, through this lineup. Unfortunately, lead vocalist in here has changed again. Just thumbing through real quick. Kent Hilly is the vocalist, who I ended up really liking. But one of the things that I like about the current lineup of Giant is they have John Roth on guitar. John Roth being from Winger. So anything that, you know, that guy goes out and does, I'm pretty interested in. Colin Hay, former Men at Work frontman, put out a solo album. Let's see, Now and the Evermore. Some of these titles, you know. There's a good picture of them right there on the inside. All right, next up, we've got Billy Howerdel from A Perfect Circle, who also Ashes Divide, if you know that. And so I happen to love both of those bands. This is a little bit different sounding than both of those. This is more on the sort of, you know, 80s new wave, you know, sort of like Depeche Mode style stuff than what we know him from in his other projects, but it was very good. This one here surprised me, House of Lords, Saints and Sinners. And we've got Mark Mangold on keyboards. I don't know if he's the reason that they kind of got a push in terms of how good this is, but the album itself really surprised me. I've bought every album and they've got a lot out there. But the last few had kind of started to wane in my opinion, and I was kind of thinking, man, I'm not going to do it this time. And then I checked out some samples from it and I was like, wow, got to do it, got to pick it up. So I ended up getting an honorable mention in my top 10 list because it was just such a good album from last year. Hoodoo Gurus, Australian band, really good stuff. Great album for them. I don't think they've done one in a long time either. So that was great to finally get it. And we got a brand new EP from Billy Idol. 4 tracks on here. Second one that he has done. And as I understand it, there is a third one on the way. So we'll hopefully be getting that sometime in 2023 and be talking about that next year. Cool supergroup that happened, one of the Frontiers Records projects, Iconic. Listen to the lineup from this. We got Tommy Aldridge on drums from White Snake, Joel Hoekstra on guitar, current White Snake, Nathan James on vocals. We've got Michael Sweet on guitar and also vocals, and then Marco Mendoza on bass. Michael Sweet from Stryper and Marco Mendoza from Thin Lizzy, amongst a number of other bands like Nugent and stuff like that. But just a very cool lineup there. Another good one that was in the running for Album of the Year was Journey, Freedom. And a lot of people came down on this one as far as the production on it. And I have to agree, it's not quite the level of studio perfectionism that we know them for. And there was a little bit of issue with Arnel Pineda's vocals on it, with maybe how they were recorded, because as I understand it, everything was done separate. They were never in the same room. They did it all remote. And there's a lot of albums like that. The Def Leppard album was done that way too. So a lot of albums that came out that wouldn't have happened without COVID, the lockdown, the pandemic, where bands learned to do that. I still very much enjoyed this album by Journey, Freedom. And, you know, it's okay if it's not quite 100% up to par. It still sounds great. Jorn had a brand new album that came out, Over the Horizon Radar. Don't know what that title means. Sounds a little odd to me. I've always kind of thought that since the album came out. Over the Horizon Radar. But it's a good album, so it doesn't matter what the title sounds like. It's still very good to me. This is, I think, the first release of 2022, and it was a strong one. Jethro Tull, the Zealot Gene, 20 years since they had put out a brand new album, so that was a really cool one to get. I mean, there's a number of ones, the Journey, the Def Leppard, the Jethro Tull, just right there. That's the first row in this box here. So that's what I'm saying. 2020 was a great year. Smith Kotzen put this out. It's a combination of like 2 EPs. It's called Better Days and Nights. And so we've got what they were calling the Days, 4 studio tracks that were outtakes from the last album and released as part of a record store day. And then they added to it, let's see, 5 live tracks to flesh it out. So we end up getting 9 tracks on this album. All right, moving on to the next row in here. We got another one that had been a long time between albums. King's X, 3 Sides of One. I don't even know how long it had been for them, but again, at least a decade. Just one of those things where those guys are always putting out solo albums and things. And the fact that they hadn't made an album, it was kind of, you know, you didn't really realize it because you were getting all these other projects and things that the band members do. But we finally got a brand new King's X album. And that was very cool. This one ran under the radar, and I didn't even find out about it until after it had come out. Lone Rider, and this one's called Sundown, which features Simon Kirke from Bad Company. So that was a very cool find to get that album, and it sounds great. If you like the Bad Company of the late 80s, early 90s, that's a great album right there. Lillian Axe from Womb to Tomb, they put out a brand new one. Again, we got a new lead vocalist in this lineup here, Brent Graham. But we still got Steve Blaze on guitars. He's been in the lineup ever since this thing kicked off, so we still got that going on. And we got a solo album from Dream Theater frontman James Labrie, a little bit different style than he normally does, a beautiful shade of gray. So it was kind of a cool thing for him to branch out a little bit and do something different there. Here was a long gestating album that finally got released, also one of the first of the year. Tony Martin Thorns, so frontman from Black Sabbath, finally doing another solo album. He had done a lot of projects in between and over the years and stuff, but had not made a proper solo album in a very long time, maybe even a good solid 10 plus years. So, you know, again, here we are. It's a number of these albums where artists hadn't put something out in a decade or longer. And that's one of the reasons that I felt that 2020 was, 2022, sorry, was such a great year. Motor Sister, Get Off. Great album, kind of super groupish, if you will. We've got Scott Ian of Anthrax in here. We've got Jim Wilson from Mother Superior, who also was the backing band to Henry Rollins and Rollins Band. So a lot of cool stuff there. Glad to get a second album from them here. This one featuring new original songs, whereas the first album were a bunch of re-recordings of Mother Superior songs. So if you want to check out what that band could do new, it's that album right there. John Mellencamp, Strictly One-Eyed Jack, brand new one from him, featuring Bruce Springsteen on 3 of the songs. I'd love it if those guys would actually make a whole album together, but very cool nonetheless that we got those 3 tracks. All right, and then we've got an album from Marillion, An Hour Before It's Dark, title of that one. I like the cover of this. It's a new one from Marillion. Magnum gave us The Monsters Roar, and or The Monster Roars. And this one here, another just good album. A lot of very solid albums coming out, start to finish on them, kind of a thing. This one here, another long gestating one, finally getting it. Midnight Oil, Resist. And it featured the final recordings of Bones Hillman, who unfortunately had passed away after completing this. So the band, this is the first full-length album in 20 years, because I believe the last one was 2002, which is before the band went on hiatus, and frontman joined Parliament in Australia and did a whole bunch of political stuff for a long time, one of the ministers there. Okay, then we got a couple from former Hanoi Rocks guys. We got Andy McCoy, this one being called Jukebox Junkie, doing a lot of cool cover songs on here. And then we got frontman Michael Monroe and a brand new album of original material from him, I Live Too Fast to Die Young. Kind of a cool title there, consummate rock star, always living it up. And his band too is kind of a super group of sorts. We've got Steve Conti in there, Sammy Yaffa on bass. Steve Conti coming from Company of Wolves, a great glam metal band from back in the early 90s. Megadeth, that was great to finally get a brand new one. 6-7 years we were waiting on this, The Sick, the Dying, and the Dead. Very ominous title and relevant title at that. Municipal Waste. This one here was a phenomenal album. If you're into thrash metal of the 80s, this is a newer band. Now, they've been around about 20 years, called Electrified Brain. But this album from start to finish is just great. Here's one I picked up, probably wouldn't have otherwise, but New Horizon, and it's called Gate of the Gods. But the reason I picked it up was because it features Eric Grönwall, who's the current lead vocalist in Skid Row, formerly lead vocalist of Heat. And as I was waiting for the brand new Skid Row to drop, which we'll be talking about when we get to S's, I picked that up to check out his vocals. We got a brand new album from Nazareth. It's called Surviving the Law. Those guys just keep going on. Carl Sentence, formerly of Persian Risk, the new wave of British heavy metal band, fronting them now. Brand new one from John Norm, guitarist from Europe. And while this one here is continuing on the way that John Norm has been doing his more bluesy era hard rock stuff, he has said that the brand new Europe album is going to be a return to form like their stuff from the mid-80s. So we'll have to wait and see. You know, sometimes artists say that and it doesn't really come out being that, but it's intrigued me nonetheless. We ended up getting two from Aldo Nova. So we ended up getting the rock opera, The Life and Times of Eddie Gage, a 10-song EP, but we also got his Reloaded, where he re-recorded a bunch of past tracks. The 10 tracks that came out as part of the Life and Times of Eddie Gage, very modern sounding recording, nothing like the 80s era Aldo Nova stuff that we know. So I wasn't able to get into it, but I heard from a lot of you guys that you did really enjoy that. Brand new one from Ozzy Osbourne came out, Patient Number 9. We've got Jeff Beck feature on that. A lot of cool guitar players playing on this. Zakk Wylde was on it throughout, but also did some lead work. Mike McCready, Eric Clapton was on this. Very, very cool way to go with that. Next one, Jerry Only, Anti-Hero. I absolutely love this album. It's so good. I like that era of the Misfits that's post-Danzig, where Jerry Only, well, there was other lineups and vocalists, but when he was fronting the group and stuff like that. So since Misfits have reformed and with Danzig and they're not recording anything new, we've got Jerry Only keeping together the last lineup of the Misfits, making this album. And it was like getting a new Misfits record, even though it's not under the Misfits name. But very good stuff, enjoying that. Here's something that's out on the Misfits Records label, Osaka Pop Star. Once upon a time, they were actually a supergroup that featured Marky Ramone, Jerry Only, and others in it, but it is now just down to the lead vocalist, John Cafiro. And then we got an EP from Primus, Conspiranoid, featuring an 11-minute and 30-second long track on here, going in a more progressive direction, just something that Les Claypool wanted to try out. And we had a brand new Pixies album get released, this one called Doggerel, if I'm saying that right. And that one really surprised me. I was not expecting to enjoy that album as much as I did. And it kicked off a whole Pixies, Breeders, you know, kind of, you know, I don't know what to call it, but just a kick going down that rabbit hole of things. All right, next one up, Alan Parsons, brand new one from him. From the New World, of course, formerly Alan Parsons Project. Now he just records under the name. Not really sure why he doesn't continue it on as the Alan Parsons Project, or whether or not there is some legal reason that he can't, but he's been doing solo albums ever since that band folded back in, I think, the late 80s. All right, David Paich, Forgotten Toys. This one turned out to be a really great one. David Paich being from Toto, singing, keyboards, and he's got Joseph Williams, current vocalist with Toto, producing on it. I think he even sings on one of the tracks. But if you like Toto, you're going to really like this album here. 7 tracks on it. Not quite what I'd call an album, even though they're calling it that. To me, that's really an EP. Then we got Love-Hate album, or we can call it Jizzy Pearl's Love-Hate. But either way, it's a Jizzy Pearl album under the Love-Hate name, Hell California. Great return to form style there for him, getting back to some down and dirty sleaze rock, if you will. Axel Rudy Pell putting out a brand new album. This one here just simply called Lost 23. Not exactly sure what the 23 aspect is because I couldn't really figure it tying into any years, and certainly not, as far as I can know, 23rd album or anything like that. But great guitar player, frontman for this group, Johnny Gioli, formerly of Hardline, from the glam metal band that once featured Neil Schon on lead guitar from Journey. And then we got Praying Mantis, new wave of British heavy metal band that's continued on. Catharsis, putting out a new one. Those guys have been having like a resurgence. Their last few albums have just been so good. And this one here, one of the best Queensryche albums made of the new era, but also gives all that old stuff a run for its money. This one here, Digital Noise Alliance DNA, really, really good. This one has more of the sound of the classic Empire era than anything they've done since then. So if you are a fan of that period and didn't check this out, check that out. And then we managed to get 2 brand new albums from Red Hot Chili Peppers. First one here, Unlimited Love, and Return of the Dream Canteen. Very good stuff. Each of these with, let's see, like 17, 18 tracks on these. So amazing that they were able to put out 2 albums, basically double albums worth of material this year. And rumor has it they've still got some more stuff in the can, so we could get more. Who knows? And then, as I was talking about Ferryman earlier, and Ronnie Romero, he put out a solo album, and it's simply called Raised on Radio, and it's cover songs of cool 80s rock tracks and stuff like that. So we have that. Next up, we've got Simple Minds put out a brand new album. This one being a deluxe edition in a book like this, because it came with 2 bonus tracks and I had to get those. So that's why I ended up picking up this one instead of just a standard edition of it. And then we got a Timothy B. Schmidt solo album, bassist from the Eagles and Poco, Day by Day. Really good one here. Simple Man, the opening track on here features Lindsey Buckingham, former Fleetwood Mac vocalist and guitarist. Slash made a really great album featuring Miles Kennedy and the Conspirators, just titled 4. Nothing exciting about that, but a great album nonetheless. And we finally got a new one from the Scorpions. This one here simply called Rock Believer. Cool thing, this one here, CD 2-disc set, the second disc in here featuring 5 additional tracks on it. They've been doing that a lot lately. They also put out a bunch of extra bonus tracks in Europe and Japan and stuff like that, and they've been releasing those digitally. So it's kind of crazy how much material these guys do. I'm kind of surprised they don't just end up doing double albums and stuff like that, but it's just a great straight ahead rocker of an album. We also got a new one from Michael Schenker Group, MSG. This one here featuring Ronnie Romero on vocals. So what, 3 albums by him so far this past year? He probably did more, but I got 3 albums from him. And then the one I was talking about a little bit earlier, also a close run at #1 album of the year, Skid Row, The Gang's All Here. Just absolutely great return to form album, a nice bridge between the debut album and Slave to the Grind. I can't say enough good things about that album. It may not have Sebastian Bach on it. It's got new vocalist Eric Gronwall on it from Heat, and also that other project that I was showing you guys, but really, really good album. It just stuck with me. Joe Satriani, cool album here. This one being titled The Elephants of Mars. Cool title. Interesting the way that he made the guitars look like elephants on the front. So we got that. This was an interesting one. It came with art prints. He's been doing digital art prints there, so you got some art prints if you picked this up. Ringo Starr put out his 3rd EP. Started these during the lockdown, the pandemic. 4 to 5 tracks a piece. I don't know if he's going to gather them all up into an album or not, but there's the 3rd one there, and I think that was the final one. Don't know if I've heard anything about a 4th one yet or not. Bruce Springsteen put out a new one called Only the Strong Survive, and this is covers of R&B songs, stuff from like the Temptations, stuff like that. I think there might even be some Supremes and things on there. new Soulfly album. Former Sepultura frontman Max Cavalera continues on in his it's no longer a side project, now his main project, but Totem. That was a good one there. And we had Michael Sweet and his side project now doing a Striper album. So continuing on with that, the Final Battle, people talking about whether that would be the final album or not. Anytime I think a band puts the word final in its album title, fans speculate, but I don't think that's going to be a final album at all. And we have Mark Storchi, if I'm saying that correct, Crocus frontman, Live and Let Live solo album. Only could get it through his website. Don't know if it ever got a much wider release other than digitally, but Crocus frontman doing that. And now there's talk about Crocus getting back together and going out and touring, even though they had folded, broken up, and retired. Now they're potentially going to continue on. Skills, another one of those Frontiers Records supergroups that got put together. This one featuring Billy Sheehan on bass from Mr. Big. Renan Zonta, vocalist. I'm not familiar with him. I think he was relatively unknown. We had Brad Gillis on guitar here from Night Ranger, and David Huff from Giant on drums. Thing was, they didn't write the songs on here, so it really didn't have any of the flavor of those guys. If this had been a mix between Mr. Big and Night Ranger, I'd have probably really enjoyed it. Some of you guys I know really enjoyed the album, and that's cool. Just wasn't much for me, though. And then we have Sword, the Canadian group, third album, coming back from the 80s, cool reunion album here, very, very good stuff. Not to be confused with The Sword, the more modern day band. All right, we had Saxon Carpe Diem. Previous year they put out a covers album, but we finally got that new studio album from them. And another new wave of British heavy metal band, Satan. And this one here called Earth Infernal. A lot of cool new wave of British heavy metal bands continuing on. Sunstorm. Guess who's lead vocalist for this? Ronnie Romero. So there you go. I have a fourth album from him, taking over for when Joe Lynn Turner was the front man. So another former Rainbow guy, because Ronnie Romero is from fronted Rainbow also. Derek Sherinian, Vortex, former keyboardist of Dream Theater, but also part of Sons of Apollo, and again, just a number of other projects. He's always doing something. And a cool supergroup, 6x6. We've got, we have Nigel Glockler on drums from Saxon, but let me see who else the other guys are, if I can find the names real quick. There we go. Ian Crichton on guitars from Saga, and Robert Berry from 3. And he did a number of different things, but he was part of Keith Emerson's band and stuff like that. So that was a cool surprise. Tears for Fears, The Tipping Point. This was such a good album, good comeback album. Another one of those ones where it had been a good decade or longer since we had gotten a new album from those guys, and we got both of them there, returning Kurt Smith and Roland Orzabal. Long time since these guys had made an album. Talus, Billy Sheehan's band from David Lee Roth band before Mr. Big, getting back together, making an album. Phil Naro, frontman, singing, unfortunately passed away after completing this new album here. So good tribute to him, but sad that he passed away. And then we've got a new one from Thunder, double album from them. Dopamine is the title of this here, but very cool that it was a double album. These guys have been dropping a lot lately. And we were talking about Joe Lynn Turner earlier, formerly of Sunstorm, finally putting out a solo album. Again, a long gestating one for him. This one here, Belly of the Beast. And he finally shaved all his hair. Apparently, he had been wearing wigs all these past years. And he finally came out now saying he's got a hair problem that had made him lose his hair, and he no longer is going to hide behind the wigs. So, more power to you, Joe Lynn Turner. Another new wave of British heavy metal band, Tigers of Pantang, put out an EP early on in the year too. 2 new studio songs, 2 re-recordings of classics. They're another one like Satan that has just had a resurgent. These groups, it's like in the last, I don't know, 5 to 10 years have just seemingly been getting better and better and better. almost giving a run for the money of that original era stuff that these bands have done. That's just my personal opinion, but that's how I feel. So I talked about King's X and those guys always doing solo projects, and we got Ty Tabor here and his album Shades. So that came out beforehand. I got to warm up for the new King's X with that. Pat Travers made a brand new album, this one called The Art of Time Travel. I've been really enjoying his last few releases as well. And we got one from former White Lion frontman Mike Tramp called For Force Gang. And this one here being all sung in his native language of Danish. So not an English language album, but if you like his vocals like me and you're a big fan of him, I had to have it for the collection. Probably won't listen to it all that much because he has made so many English language albums. I'll just stick with those. We got a brand new one from Ugly Kid Joe. This one was really good. Rad Wings of Destiny. I just like that album title. Play on Sad Wings of Destiny from Judas Priest. Urge Overkill made a comeback with Oui, French for Yes. And this one too, good stuff. They hadn't done anything in a long time. Voivod finally got a full-length album from them after a couple EPs that they had put out. Synchro Anarchy, title of that one. And then we've got Eddie Vedder's solo album here. And it'd been a while since he had done a solo project too. And he's not one to do a lot of side work. He'll do one-off single or song for a soundtrack and things like that. But to get a whole album doesn't happen often. And Josh Klinghoffer, former Red Hot Chili Peppers guitar player, played on this album. That was a cool thing for him to find a home with that. Ann Wilson, lead vocalist of Heart, made a solo album called Fierce Bliss. And after her last two that she had done that had a lot of cover songs, and this one does too, but didn't really seem to have a rockin' feel to it. This one here, much more in that vein, feeling like it should be something from the Heart front woman. Another new wave of British heavy metal group, White Spirit, second album, Right or Wrong. And after the original run of the band, they actually had Brian Howe, former vocalist for Ted Nugent and Bad Company, front the group, and they recorded some stuff, but it never got released. And so they finally completed those songs, kept his vocals and fixed the music on a number of those things, and then they had to bring in a few other vocalists to finish things out on some of the tracks. So we had Jeff Scott Soto, Steve Overland, people like that coming in and finishing up. We got a bunch of them with Brian Howe. All right, two more to go here. Neil Young and World Record. This album recorded with Rick Rubin. You know, it is a Crazy Horse album, but the last, this being the third Crazy Horse album now to have been released with him as the backing band, but none of these have had that rock sound that we know Crazy Horse for when they really get down and dirty and grungy and dirgy and so forth. But, you know, they've got a new lineup of Crazy Horse with Nils Lofgren from the E Street Band in there, and he did play with them back in the day. So he's not just new for this, but I think that is part of the reason that we don't have the full-on rockin' without Poncho in there. And the last one, Chips Enough. So we got a new Enough's Enough, but we also got a Chips Enough solo album. And what a great way to finish things off. 101 cool new studio albums that came out this past year, 2022, and a great way to look back at the year. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. I'm sure there was a ton of other albums that came out that you guys may have gotten that I didn't get. Feel free to let me know which one was your favorite of 2022. All right, everyone, take care, have a good one, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.